inside, and knowing that we had shooters all around, so they couldn't really help off of her. And I thought, Mai did a really good job too, just being a spark and like kind of, helping us.
Snow fell softly against the windows of the Clark family kitchen in West Des Moines that December evening in 2024, muffling the world outside in a hush of white. Inside, the old wooden table that had once held school books, crayon drawings, and half-eaten bowls of cereal was now covered in scholarship applications for Caitlin's foundation. Pages filled with dreams, determination, and stories that mirrored her own. She sat quietly, her pen moving slowly, her breath fogging the air slightly near the frosted glass. Her father, Brent, stood in the doorway for a long time before speaking, his weathered hands tucked into his pockets, watching the little girl he once coached in the driveway, now carrying the weight of changing other young lives. When he finally crossed the room and placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice was gentle but heavy with feeling. "Never forget where you came from, sweetheart," he whispered. Not the success, not the fame, but that little girl who practiced free throws in the cold until her hands went numb. The words landed like a quiet revelation, stirring something deep inside her. For a moment, she couldn't answer. She simply stared at the papers scattered before her, the faces of teenagers chasing the same impossible dream she once had. She looked up, and their eyes met, the silence between them filled with years of unspoken gratitude. As Caitlin read through the next application, she found herself lost in memories of long drives in her father's old truck, the smell of coffee in a thermos between them as they set out before dawn to reach tournaments hours away. She remembered her mother, and quietly mending her practice shorts, counting coins for petrol, or sitting in the bleachers cheering with tired eyes but unshaken pride. She remembered the sandwiches they packed because eating out was too expensive, the nights spent in budget motels where she'd fall asleep still clutching her basketball. For years, she had seen those things as simple facts of life. Only now did she see them for what they truly were. Sacrifices offered with love so pure it never demanded recognition. "This one breaks my heart," Caitlin murmured, lifting an application from a 15-year-old girl in rural Nebraska whose parents drove 4 hours each way to get her to practice. They're working 3 jobs and still taking out loans for her training. "It reminds me of us, doesn't it, Dad?" Brent's eyes glistened as he nodded, the proud silence between them saying more than words ever could. In that moment, she realized her parents had carried her dream as if it were their own, shielding her from the weight of their struggles so she could run free toward her future. Brent's whisper was more than fatherly advice. It was a confession, a promise kept. Years earlier, when Caitlin was still a child shooting hoops in the fading light of an Iowa evening, he had promised himself that no matter how high she soared, she would never lose touch with the soil that raised her. He had seen too many people forget their success built on sacrifices they no longer acknowledged. He wanted something different for her, to remember not just the journey but the love that carried her across it. As he looked at his daughter now, her success had outgrown the small-town dreams they once shared, yet her spirit, thoughtful, grounded, compassionate, remained the same. "You and Mum gave me everything," she said softly, her voice trembling. "And I don't mean the training or the opportunities. I mean the faith. You made me believe I could do this." Her father smiled, blinking back tears. "All we ever wanted was for you to believe in yourself. Love. The rest was always yours to find." She thought of how fame had changed her world. The cameras, the interviews, the expectations. Yet sitting there, surrounded by stories of other young dreamers, she realized the truest part of her life was not the arenas or the applause, but this, the quiet kitchen, the father who still called her his little girl, and the reminder that success without gratitude was empty. "I do remember," Caitlin said through tears, her voice soft but certain. "I remember you standing out there in the snow, rebounding for me when I wanted to shoot just one more round. You never once complained, even when it was freezing, even when we had nothing." She paused, looking at him with eyes full of understanding that hadn't existed before. "I used to think you were just proud of me for winning, but now I see you were proud because I never gave up. Because that's who we are." Brent exhaled deeply, his face lined with the years of early mornings and late nights that had built their family's story. "That's exactly it," he said quietly. "It was never about the trophies or the headlines. It was about heart." Outside, the snow kept falling, coating the old basketball hoop in the driveway, now a silent monument to the countless hours they had spent together chasing something bigger than themselves. And inside, in that small kitchen filled with the hum of memory, a father and daughter sat side by side, not as a sports icon and her mentor, but simply as two souls bound by love, sacrifice, and gratitude. The success, the fame, the foundation, all of it
We were able to put together stretches where we were getting the stops and getting the rebound. We were not scoring on the other end, but at least they weren't either. And I think, it just shows like JJ.
In the quiet warmth of the Clark family kitchen on a snowy December evening in West Des Moines, the air seemed thick with the weight of memory and meaning. Caitlin sat at the same worn wooden table where she had once scribbled her homework, now poring over scholarship applications for her foundation. Each story a reflection of her own journey, of humble beginnings and extraordinary dreams. Her father, Brent, stood silently in the doorway for a moment, the flicker of the kitchen light catching the glint of emotion in his eyes. Then, quietly, almost reverently, he said the words that had been resting on his heart for months. "Never forget where you came from." When he finally took a seat beside her, his gaze fell on the stack of applications that had prompted this moment of reflection. "You know," he began softly, "your mom and I always saw supporting your dreams as a privilege, not a sacrifice. We never once felt burdened by your ambition. Kate, watching you grow, seeing your dreams outgrow the boundaries of our little town, it was never something we had to endure. It was the greatest joy of my life." Caitlin's eyes glistened as her father's voice carried the weight of years. The sleepless nights, the financial worries, the long drives to tournaments in the freezing Iowa winters. That evening, father and daughter spoke for hours, their conversation stretching long past midnight, a tender excavation of unspoken fears and long-suppressed gratitude. Brent revealed something that took Caitlin by surprise. Throughout her childhood, he had kept a journal. "I wrote in it every night," he said quietly. "Not about your stats or your wins, but about who you were becoming. I worried that the world might try to change you, that fame might take away the kindness and humility your mother and I tried to raise you with. But sitting here, tonight, watching you help these families with the same compassion you've always had, I know we did something right." Caitlin reached for her father's hands, feeling the familiar calluses from years of hard work, proof of the sacrifices that had shaped her path. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling yet steady, "every record, every title, every chance I've been given, none of it matters if I forget where it all began. Everything started here, with parents who believed in me before I even believed in myself." It was then that a spark of inspiration lit within her, something so pure and instinctive that it brought Brent to tears. "I want to add something new to our foundation," she said. "A program for parents like you and Mom, people who give up so much to make their children's dreams possible. They deserve recognition, too." Her words marked the birth of what would become the Hometown Heroes program, an initiative that extended the reach of the Caitlin Clark Foundation beyond scholarships and into the heart of what makes achievement meaningful, the families who stand behind it. The program would go on to provide financial and emotional support for parents struggling to afford travel, equipment, or even the basic costs that come with nurturing a child's potential. "This isn't just about the kids," Caitlin explained at the foundation board meeting weeks later. "It's about honoring the parents who drive through blizzards to get their children to tournaments, who take extra shifts to pay for gear, who believe when no one else does." The first recipients of the Hometown Heroes Award were, fittingly, Brent and Clark, honored not for their daughter's fame, but for their own steadfast love and belief. It was a moment that redefined success in Caitlin's eyes, no longer measured by records or accolades, but by gratitude and legacy. As the program grew, helping thousands of families across America, Brent often thought back to that December night, the kitchen bathe, in the soft hum of the refrigerator, the scent of coffee in the air, and his daughter's eyes shining with a newfound understanding. he realized that what had begun as a simple reminder had become something far greater, a philosophy of life. Success without gratitude, Caitlin would later say, is hollow. Achievement without acknowledging those who made it possible is meaningless. Years later, when young athletes would approach her for advice, she would always repeat the same wisdom her father had shared that night. Never forget where you came from. Not the trophies, not the headlines, but the people who believed in you before the world knew your name. The Clark family kitchen became almost sacred in its symbolism, a place where real conversations outshone public recognition, where love spoke louder than applause. Caitlin often said that everything she built, the foundation, the programs, the legacy, was rooted not in fame, but in those ordinary evenings when her parents taught her what success truly meant. In time, she came to see that the measure of a person's greatness lies not in how high they climb, but in how deeply they remember their roots, how much they give back to the soil that first nourished their dreams. And so, every time the world celebrated Caitlin Clark's triumphs, somewhere in Iowa, a father would quietly smile, knowing that his whispered words on that snowy night had become the heartbeat of his daughter's legacy. A legacy not of trophies, but of gratitude, humility, and the unbreakable bond between a dreamer and the family who helped